Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And remember, if you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, check out my information and book a call with me at offthecomma.com. And I'm also doing something different. I'm curating my own sponsor community, local businesses and professionals who I handpick and who align with our vision here. Be sure to check them out, learn more about them on my website and my YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. And we are back with another exciting episode of Off the Comma, and more of this just important work that we do to be able to open up lines of communication, share stories, talk about our experiences, and really just honor the experiences and the stories that folks have to tell. And this week is no exception. I'm very grateful to be able to be here and be part of this work and to bring this work to all of you who are listening. And so this week we are with Stuart Preston, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a moment. But another person who I will be essentially meeting for the first time during our conversation today. I'm very much looking forward to getting to know Stuart and hearing about him through his story that he's going to be sharing, and adding another powerful voice to this community of storytellers that we have here on Off the Comma. So with that, Stuart, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself. And Stuart, one of the things we do here is, as you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, I'd love it if you could start by sharing how would you like to be known as a person, and then just what would you like us to know?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Paul, and thank you for all the amazing good work you're doing here. I know you're doing a lot of good, and that is my purpose in life, is to help people do good. And in terms of how do I want to be known, honestly, I try to detach myself from that kind of a notion. There's been a lot of years, 9 years of work, kind of trying to tame my ego and understand my ego. And so, how do I want to be known is not so much on my mind. But what I'd like to be able to do out there, I'm a public speaker, a motivational speaker, and that came from 20 years of doing kind of like business speaking, seminars, those kind of things, right? And then the last 10 years, I've been doing stand-up comedy.
Oh, nice.
And for the last 5 years, I've been doing a one-man show about my story, which we'll get into. But I've come full circle in this to wanting to be able to share my story, and I think ultimately help people who are going through something really, that their comma, that maybe they're not only sitting on their comma, but maybe their comma has got them by the short hairs and isn't letting them go. Maybe that's the way I would put it, is like, I can't get away from my comma, is maybe to give them hope that, that transformation is possible. Even in some, I haven't been through the worst of circumstances, so I'm certainly not here to preach to people and say, get over it, right? But it's maybe some hope. If I could just drop a drop of hope for people that are more than like glued to their comma, right? Then maybe that would be what I would hope that people would take away from our conversation or from my speeches or whatever.
I really appreciate how you said glued to your comma, because as you're describing things, other words that are coming up for me, and you tell me, if this lands or not, but like you said, hope, and I'm also hearing like possibility and power or empowerment, ability to claim your freedom. Like, it seems like what you're saying and what you shared with us is like, help people see that there's more than just the comma and that they actually can take charge of it.
Yeah. And for me, it's even, and that's great. Yeah. Taking charge and having some power and having some agency over your own situation. But like in the situation I was in, that was not even on my mind. You know what I mean? So every
Hmm.
now and then some people go through something where they're not thinking about empowering themselves or taking agency. They're just like in survival mode or in frozen trauma mode. Whatever it is, has got them in a place where I know for me, I wasn't necessarily thinking at all.
Hmm.
For a
Hmm.
year, maybe my ears were ringing. I couldn't take a full breath. I wasn't in a place where I thought to myself, hey, I'm not really making the best out of life. I literally was walking around at like almost like after a bomb went off and just trying to focus my eyes and be able to
Hmm.
hear something in it. So I don't know, but what I will say is almost accidentally, I got to this place in time, and I got to a place maybe a year or two after my loss that my mom had asked me, "Do you think you'll ever be able to be happy again?" She was worried that that her son would
Hmm.
never be happy again. And I said, "Yeah, of course I can be happy. I'm always happy." And I'm not a happy person. I'm not one of these, you hear me say that I did stand up. People think I'm, a cut up and happy and class clown. The truth is, most of us are like really despondent, mentally ill. I mean,
Hmm.
we are really not okay. But we get up on
Hmm.
stage and we make everybody laugh, so everybody thinks we're okay. But inside of me, I know that there's happiness,
Hmm. Okay.
even in the worst of times. I could feel the happiness inside, even though it was the sadness which predominantly ruled my emotions.
Hmm.
So I think that's where I'm coming from that.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. And I know we're going to get into a lot of the specifics here in a few moments, but what I'm taking from it is that somebody who's experienced something and you care enough to want to be able to share that with others in case that changes the trajectory in any way for them. I so appreciate
Yeah, because
that.
I think that's how it happens, right? I mean, I'm not like the most religious guy in the world, or I mean, I came before all this happened to me in my life. I was a very hardcore atheist. I didn't believe in anything. I was like, show it to me, show me the chemical reaction, or else I'm not going to believe it.
Hmm.
But you get to a point. I've gotten to a point. I'm not going to tell anybody else that they should get to this point or that they will. But I get to a point where sometimes I see lessons and coincidences or whatever it is that the universe drops in front of me, and now I'm like more open to seeing like, hey, that's something I should pay attention to. That's somebody that I
Hmm.
can help or whatever it is. And so I think that, yeah, those kind of things come along. And once I was open enough to it, I could see those things and it kind of helped guide me along my path.
Yeah. It's actually a good, that's a good springing point, I should say, to the next question I want to ask. Before we get into the 5 questions, I always start with every guest and say, as you think ahead to the next 35 or 40 minutes or so of our conversation, and in your telling of the story today, what intention would you have for yourself?
To be real and to be forthright and to speak from the heart. Because one of the things that is important to me that I hope people get from listening to me or coming to my talk or whatever it is just being genuine and breaking stigmas by talking. So
Hmm.
I try to not let there be any kind of a shield or a layer of protection or a mask or anything like that, because that just perpetuates very dangerous, stigmas. So I guess my
Hmm.
intention would be, I hope that I'm able to be my true, genuine self.
Okay. All right. My intention is to obviously support you in your intention today by creating this space for you to be able to share your story. And also that in you sharing your story, like so many others have before you and will continue to, is that there will be people out there who hear your story and they'll see a little bit of themselves in that and in your story and in you. They will feel a little bit more connected, a little bit less alone, and in the best of cases, maybe even inspired or empowered to do something that they've been wanting to do.
That would be great.
Let's jump into it then. So, Stuart, the first question is, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
So, as I look back now, I feel like I was sitting on a comma in your context, and what I've looked at in terms of how you help people.
Hmm.
I think I sat on a comma for almost my entire life
Mm.
because I never allowed myself to really step out, to really experience, to really try, and I've accomplished things here and there. If, some people heard me say that, they'd be like, "Oh, come on, BS." You know what I mean? You did this, you did that. But isn't it, it's a lot about how you feel inside, right? Is about when you're on this
Mm-hmm.
comma. And I think I was never really able to get off my comma. I think there was always a hesitation. There was always a moment of, yeah, I mean, don't try this or don't try that or don't give it your all. For a lot of people, we don't want to give it our all. I didn't want to give it my all, I think, because I was worried about, failing and realizing that I wasn't as good as I maybe could have been. And because everything came easy to me. I'm one of those people that I'm not like Alan Alda where I would get an Oscar for everything I did, right? But
Mm.
everything came easy enough to me that I could pick up tennis or the trombone and be okay at it,
Mm-hmm.
And but I never wanted to get off that comma and give it a real try
Mm.
fear of not being able to actually be good at it, right? And then the story, then when things blew up, I think that my comma was like standing right next to me looking at me. You know what I mean? And it was just like, hey, I don't know if you knew that I was here this whole time.
Mm.
And I finally got to a point where my whole entire reality shifted. There was a minute before and a minute after that I was a completely different person and my reality was not the same.
Okay. Before you continue though, if I may, let me jump in for a second because I want to clarify something here because I believe I am understanding what you're saying because I think there's a part of this that as your story unfolds is going to resonate very much with me. But just to clarify, so what I'm hearing you say is that throughout your life, there have been things that have been pretty easy to pick up, and you've been able to do a lot of things, and you've been kind of okay with a bunch of different things, and kind of like usual and customary status quo. But that when you say I've been sitting on a comma my entire life, it sounds like what you're saying is you didn't feel like you pursued any of those things far enough to become great at it or to really enjoy it. Like that's the part I'm not entirely sure I'm clear about is what really was the comma, just that you didn't go further with any of the things, that everything kind of stayed at average, or I'm making up words right now.
Yeah, and
Say a little
it's
bit
pretty
more about
close. I
that.
mean, some things I did were above average. So it has nothing to do with the outcome, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, growing up as a kid, I did play the trombone and I was actually pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
My teacher he played in Elvis's studio band and he was on the Flintstones theme song. I mean, this was a guy
Mm-hmm.
who really knew how to play the trombone.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to be pretty good at the trombone. So it wasn't a matter of like being stuck in like necessarily mediocrity. It's more in my head, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
more of my not willing to take that next step to get to that next piece or whatever of just saying, you know what, I'm comfortable here in my pause. You know what I mean? This is a place I'm okay with. Whereas if I try even harder, there's the possibility that I won't make the next step. I got to this place fairly easily
Mm-hmm.
without much effort, but if I give it some effort in and I fail, then I won't be able to really get where I want to go. And I don't really know. I think that that's a lot of what my thinking was. I think that, I grew up as a kid with very little self-esteem and very little confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if I had, abilities to get to do things and learn how to do things, I never had the confidence or the self-esteem to believe that I could do something or to believe that I could take it to a certain level. So I was always just happy with whatever level I got to naturally. And sometimes it was fairly good and sometimes it was not. I was a C student my whole life until I went to get my MBA. That was the first time I ever sat in front of the class and tried. And I don't know. I think it was just a matter of me just not being willing to jump out there.
Okay. So I'm hearing, I mean, obviously it's rich and it's complex, right? Because we're talking about, like you said, it's feelings, it's self-esteem and so forth. What I'm hearing you say is that it always felt like there was more you could do that you weren't challenging yourself or pushing yourself to do. And when you said I was a C student my entire life, I think that kind of painted a picture for me. But what I think I'm hearing you say is like, until I did my master's program, I never pushed myself to be a B or an A student.
No, I was happy with C's.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And even in my school system, we had one of those school systems where you could take an advanced class and get one grade higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I took all the advanced classes because I knew that I was going to get a C no matter what. And I was like, my
Mm.
C's better count as a B. And if I occasionally get a B, it better count as an A because I'm going to get a C or occasionally a B no matter what, just because that's where I
Mm.
am. Put me in any
Mm-hmm.
class, I'm going to get a C because I'm going to pay enough attention to do the tests. I'm not going to do any of the homework. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And I'm not going to read any books, and I'm just going to get through the class and get my C. So I might as well get a B for it. So I actually, this is what I'm telling you. It's not like, so I actually was in like the honor society at some point,
Okay.
and I almost found that offensive. You know what I mean? I was almost like, what do you mean I'm in the honor society? This is not,
Mm.
I don't even care. So I don't know. So it
Interesting.
just, but it's not great, right? So I watched my sister who didn't have any commas, or maybe she did and I just don't, but she would just blaze through and get her 4.8 and go to the fancy schools and do all this amazing stuff. And it's just because I think she didn't have something in her mind that was giving her a pause. You know what I mean? And she just was
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do this." And for me, it was always like, "Whoa, don't take that step yet." You know what I mean? Let's stay here hidden behind this comma.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing, and that's the part that I kind of relate to, right? Is there was always a conversation in your head, in your mind. There was always some level of like expectations and barometer of measuring up to your own internal expectations. And it sounds like even a debate between what's more, what's less, what's worth pursuing, what's not. Like it's just that, right? It's the conversation.
Well, it's thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and thoughts create actions. You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing people have been telling us forever. Some of us finally listen, some of us don't. But the ego, there's an old saying. Let's see if I can get it right. The ego is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing of it is, so many of us, including myself, before recent times, identify with our ego. So when this
Mm-hmm.
voice inside of my head is telling me all these negative things, like you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, you're not strong enough, or whatever. When the ego is doing all this, because all it's trying to do is protect me. It's an evolutionary thing that happens in our head. You know what I mean? And my ego is just trying to protect me, and just trying to keep me safe. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it's pretty destructive. I think for my son, it was ultimately destructive. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, these negative thoughts, really built this comma, and I think it was me believing that those thoughts were me.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot to get to a point in life where you realize, oh, these thoughts are not me, and I can actually train these thoughts inside of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big part of it. Is this ego mind?
Yeah, and you said the words holding back, and that certainly resonates too. Stuart, I stepped in earlier to kind of clarify. You were on the brink of taking us someplace, I believe, and sharing more about your story and what happened next. You were talking about your loss.
Yeah. So I lost my son, Ian,
Mm.
9 years ago to suicide. And, life was pretty normal up until that point. And we had no clue. He was 19 years old. He was a software engineer making really good money, never went to college, just a super bright, amazing kid, strong leader, hilarious, great sense of humor, very competitive. I mean, it's almost like if you built a 19-year-old, you'd be like, oh, I want it to be just like Ian,
Hmm.
but he was struggling. We just didn't know it. Probably half of people who die by suicide hide it well enough that people don't know. And it's
Hmm.
really tragic. And it has a lot to do with stigma. People are just not willing to come out and say, I'm struggling, I'm having a problem, because their egos are just telling them all kinds of lies. So and people out there listening, anybody who's experienced something, sometimes we experience something that changes your whole reality, that before it happened, you were one person, and after it happened, you're a completely different person. And I won't say
Mm.
completely different. Like some people who maybe didn't know what I was going through, they may be like, wow, Stuart doesn't seem the same. He seems, maybe he's a little sad. Why is he even more sarcastic than normal? But inside, the world without Ian, the world in that level of grief, and it's a traumatic loss, that kind of a loss, because it
Mm.
happens unexpectedly. It's like if you lose a child, that's a deep grief. But when you lose one unexpectedly, to a car accident, to suicide, to murder, whatever it is, that creates a trauma. And a lot of traumatic events out there create this shift in reality. And so,
Mhm.
ironically, I think what the shift in reality did for me is my comma stayed in the old me, and I was then in a new me, and my
Mm.
reality was completely different. I went forward in, at the time, what was a unique way. I think the path I chose is becoming a little more common, a little more understood. But I took a certain path at the time that was a little less common and understood, but it really, so to speak, cracked open my container and lifted me off of my comma. And I was able to finally look around. I was finally able to start taming the ego and starting to understand what life is and what consciousness is, and maybe what the purpose is, things that, you know, I used to laugh at. If somebody said, "Oh, why?" It's important to
Mm.
understand why. I'd be like, no, that's not important to understand why. You know what I mean? It's just
Mm.
understand how. How does the universe work? How does your mind work? It doesn't matter why it works that way.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that's what shifted me, is just this tragedy.
I want to certainly acknowledge your loss.
Thank you.
I mean, as you said, that is just among the most significant. And I've certainly not had kids. I've certainly not had to lose a child, but I do have friends who have lost kids. I have friends who have known people who died by suicide. So just acknowledging that part of your story and that experience that
Thank you.
you obviously still carry. And I'll go ahead and ask the second of the five questions, and you can kind of go back and forth as you continue to tell the story. The second question is what did that create for you as a result of this comma, this sitting on this comma, this part of your story?
Um, it created the potential for transformation and freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard. I think a lot of parents who have lost a child, there's a tremendous amount of guilt that goes with this. I
Mm.
failed my son. He died because of me. I couldn't save my son. It's my fault. There's a tremendous amount of guilt around this whole thing. Um, so to turn around and also say that this event played a significant, profound role in plucking me off of my comma carries a lot of guilt with it. And what I try to tell people is, I would give it all back in a heartbeat. If I could have Ian back again, I would give everything all back. I give all the things I've learned. I would give all the things I've whatever. I give it all back to just have him here again. Now there's I believe, and I wrote this in my book, that we love people, we love other humans, and we love
Mm-hmm.
dogs and cats and whatever, right? And we have all this love. And when we lose somebody, we lose like one piece of that love, right? So I had to let go of the emotional attachment to my son's physical presence, because I knew he was never going to come walking down the stairs, never going to drive into the driveway, never going to give me that look and that laugh when we both recognize an inappropriate joke, together. That's never going to happen again. But I still have him with me
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
love and in spirit and in memories. And those things will never go away, right? Those are things that, I mean, until my brain shuts off, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
even not then, those things are never going to go away. So would I love to hug my son? He wasn't much of a hugger, but would I love to hug him and punch him in the shoulder and see his smile and hear his laugh and hear him tell the inappropriate jokes and say things? There's an old Twitter feed out there. I won't say the bad word because it seems like a non-sweary situation, but it's stuff Ian said, right? His coworkers would put that out there, and he would say some of the most offensive stuff, but very, very hilarious because he was just a very straight shooter. And so all that, that's, so it's I feel like I'm coming off the rails on this and forget the question, but those are the things that, the guilt that comes with thinking that that's what plucked me off my comma. For parents like me, that's very rough. You almost don't want to be happy, right? I think there's a lot of people out there lost their daughter, their son, however, whatever it is, and they're just like, if I am happy, I will be betraying the love of my child.
I think it's powerful, if I may.
Please.
I think it's powerful that you share that, because that's one of the things that I certainly hope we do here on this podcast is, we can talk about experiences of being stuck or things happening in life and so forth. And a lot of times when people are listening, they'll be like, oh, yeah. We kind of make assumptions. Yeah, I know what that's like, and we're tracking. But this is one of those moments where it's like, we can only understand your experience through what you share. And it sounds like you're getting to something here that some people might not even think about or consider or have understood. And you talking about this, I think it's extremely enlightening about, in the face of such a tragic loss, that generally, in our society as humans, we talk about, when you lose someone and the grieving process and time heals wounds and so forth. What I'm hearing you describe is a situation where you're resistant to the healing because there's these beliefs that are a part of it, well-formed beliefs, right?
Yeah, you feel like you're totally betraying your lost loved one. How could I possibly be happy without you here in my life? And so the idea of experiencing happiness and joy in life, I think that it can be a challenge. One can feel like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to betray my kid. And so that's definitely a challenge. And there's a lot of resistant emotions on many different levels. And I'm not a therapist or a psychologist. I can only explain what I have experienced and what other people come to me and share their experiences. And there are groups on Facebook of parents who have lost kids to suicide. And, you see a lot of themes like that where you just feel like, yeah, it's not okay for me to try to heal. Because I tell people, you heal with your grief. You don't heal from it. Right? Because there is no, and that's not I didn't make up that. I got that from somebody else out there, but I can't remember who it was. So whoever you are, if you hear this, send me an email. But it's, you cannot heal from grief because number one, it's permanent, right? It's not something that you can heal from. I can't get plastic surgery. There's nothing I can do to erase this grief. And it's because of my love, right? It's because of my love for Ian. This grief is never going to go away. There's no healing. There's no moving on. You know what I mean? It's just, this becomes a part of your life. And I think when I was able to accept that, like I said earlier, accept that I'm never going to see Ian's physical presence here again, let go of my emotional attachment to that, then I was able to start to heal with this broken heart. Right. And so I understand that. And yes, you're right. Things, time does heal. It's the kind of thing. There's a really good book out there by Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor down at the University of Arizona. Don't hold that against her. It's a good book. And she's down at the U of A, and she talks about the neuroscience of grief and how your brain builds models of the things that we love. And then when the things that we love are gone, our brain keeps reconstructing these models and then realizing that it's not there. So if Ian came walking down the stairs every day at 3 p.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever it was, this model get built in my brain that's like, oh, Ian comes down at this time. And then he doesn't. And my brain still builds the model. And then there's no Ian. And my brain goes, oh, so sad. You know what I mean? There's no more Ian. Oh my God. And I start getting really sad. And I call it a landmine. When you go through grief, these landmines blow up and you just drop into a deep grief. But over time, through something called neuroplasticity, your brain rebuilds the pathways. And you get neuroplasticity through meditation, and you get it through psychedelics like I went through, and you get it through just waking up every day and going through your day. Your brain builds new pathways, and that's part of how we heal, as long as we're not too resistant to it. And, I'm not, and I don't want that to come across like I'm blaming anybody for being resistant. So the other thing is, I will acknowledge, and some people say I'm wrong, but I will acknowledge I'm a dad. I didn't grow Ian inside of me. I didn't build this human being inside of me and then deliver this human being into the world. A mother, I think, goes through a whole different level of grief because of that connection, because she literally shares DNA with that kid. And I'm not just talking about, the chromosomes. I'm talking about her mother's DNA is still in her blood and is passed on.
Yeah.
And so there's a connection with a mother. So if I see a mother who is in just deep, deep, morbid, terrible, complex grief, I would never, ever presume to ever give her advice or recommend anything. All I can do is share my story. And if something of it resonates with her, that would be wonderful. But I also understand if she just can't, you know what I mean? It's because it's just that bad, and so.
And you're also reinforcing something. You said something earlier about being an expert and so forth, and I'm like, that's the beauty of what we do here. Is we're not looking for experts, we're looking for people sharing their own experience. You're an expert in your experience, and people will learn from and take what they can from your experience, as you just described. When you share it with others, particularly mothers and others who have been through similar experiences, and that's what I so appreciate about you being willing to share this story, and for people to be able to see some insight into what it's like to experience that. There will be others who can relate because they too may have experienced it. I think there's a lot of people too who I've never experienced it, but now I understand somebody I know a little bit more, or I can empathize a little bit more.
Which would be great. And I don't mean to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
So many people don't get it. And it's really not their fault, right? But people say things that are hurtful, harmful. They expect us to be done with this in a year. And it's forever. Sorry, man, but this is forever. So don't expect me to get over it, right? It's not going to happen. Best I can do is learn to heal with my grief. And they'll say a lot of really dumb things to us. And I agree with you. So what you're saying just resonated with me, is that if they can hear some of us talking, and they can really develop some true empathy and say, oh, I haven't been through this. I can't imagine it, because I couldn't imagine it the day before. I could not have imagined how bad this is. But maybe they can get a glimpse of it and go, I maybe can at least understand how bad this is for my friend, and just be there for them. You don't need to fix their problems. You don't need to solve anything. All you got to do is stand next to them.
And that's one of the things I so appreciate you saying that, because it's one of the things we don't necessarily say that with the podcast, but I know that it's a natural, an output of what we're doing here, which is, people can tell their stories, and we don't have to fix them. We don't have to put ourselves into them. We don't have to take them anywhere or do anything with them. So like you said, maybe somebody will get empathy. And if not, there's at least appreciation that there's absolutely nothing this needs from me right now. Right.
Right. Yep. Just hold space.
Stuart, let me ask you the third question. Feel free to continue to go back at any point into your story. But as you look back at the comma that you were sitting on that you've shared with us, what did you learn about yourself as a result of this? Or what do you continue to learn about yourself?
So for me, it's capital S, self. And I really hesitate to get into anything too spiritual or woo-woo. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to. I don't want to sound like, oh, I found Jesus, and all you have to do is find Jesus. Whatever works for you, man. You know what I mean? Go. And so that's one of the sayings I've pulled from this whole thing. Is a saying, I think it comes out of Japan, but a mountain may have one peak, but there are many paths to the top. And so what I tell people is find your own path. I mean, sure, you can walk along with me if you want, but I'm telling you, whatever I say, I'm not telling you this is the way to do it, right? There's my way. There's meditation, there's psychedelics, there's wiffle ball. there's Jesus and there's, whatever. Just find your own method and whatever. So when I talk about the self, what have I discovered about myself? As I have discovered my actual capital S self.
Mm.
And it's my soul. It's my essence. It's really who I am. It's just like the movie Soul. I've watched that movie 5 times, and not just
Hmm.
because they make fun of sound meditation practitioners like me, right? It's a deep movie that talks about the meaning of life, and it really resonates with me.
Mm.
And again, I'm not telling people to go watch it so you can learn how to live with the big S self. But that's what I've learned is there's levels of consciousness, right? And so there's like your physical sensual self. And then on top of your senses is your mind. And maybe on top of your mind is your ego. And then on top of your ego is maybe a level of consciousness, like awareness, like I'm aware of my ego. If you like, who's listening to your thoughts? You have thoughts, right? Who's the
Hmm.
one doing the listening? When people think about that, they're like, yeah, who's doing the listening? It's
Hmm.
like, who is that? Is there 2 of me? And then you start to realize it's your big S self. You know what I mean? It almost sounds like another swear word. I'm saying S, the letter S.
We
It,
we swear here, so it's
oh,
okay.
we
Say
do?
what you.
Yeah. So I'm not
Yeah,
saying your big
because
ass
it's your
self.
story. Yeah.
All right. All right. Because I'm very sweary. And so it's your big S self listening to your ego and your
Hmm.
thoughts. And when I got to a point where I realized that and I understood, and it's not like I'm always in that space. Sometimes I have some really dark nights, where I sink and I have a very difficult time. So I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I've done all this stuff and I can grow my beard and wear my white robe and be perfect, right? There's constant dark nights that come around.
Hmm.
But I think that's what I discovered is kind of a true understanding of who I am in my soul and in my essence, whatever you want to call it, in this human life. I've got this human meat bag life that I am
Hmm.
living, right? That I get to experience through this person called Stuart. And I think that for me has been very profound because it enables me to understand the bigger purposes and understand the whys of life, the whys of my life specifically,
Hmm.
and to just be here in the moment, right? Be here now. That's like the key to just be here in this moment.
I want to acknowledge something. And again, when I acknowledge, reflect, correct me any place where either I'm off or it doesn't land. But you shared certainly a lot of very intimate details of your own experience with sitting on a comma and getting off the comma, and certainly so much tragedy and heartbreak in what you experienced. And what I see as I'm also kind of like zooming out and looking at the trajectory of you and your journey and your story is like I also see someone who, without it being perfect, without it being pretty, without it being some kind of gilded package or what have you, you also took this tragedy and have made a decision to move forward, however that may be for you, and that there are things you're taking from it that will continue to move you forward. And it's not like a motion picture or a book or anything like that, but I see in you what I see in so many other people who have shared their stories is, and there was still future, and I am still in it. And what is that going to look like for me? And here's some things that now this is something I've learned about myself as a result of it. Is that a fair summary of like if we were doing
Yeah.
a
I mean,
Cliff
it's a very,
Notes?
very good summary. Yeah, that's a good summary. I try not to look to the
Mm-hmm.
future, right? Because the future for me doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always do it. I try to just live here, right here in this moment. Um, and also, when you talk about that, I made a decision that I wanted to make things better. I didn't. I just got very, very lucky.
Mm.
My son died, shifted my whole entire reality. And I started working very intentionally, even though I don't love that word in this context. I worked very intentionally with psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
and they helped me and moved me into this space that I'm in. I went from being a very selfish kind of a person,
Mm-hmm.
and what I learned going down that road is that we are all one, that we're all connected, that what connects us is love. And I don't care if you believe that or not. You know what I mean? I'm experiencing it, and you are
Hmm.
where you are, and I am where I am. And I don't mean you, Paul. I just mean, anybody else.
Sure.
And it's so I almost can't take credit for it, right?
Hmm.
It's like, Einstein would say, I didn't think of anything, I didn't solve anything, it just popped into my brain. And it's kind of the same thing. It is, I can look back and just feel like, dang, am I lucky that I ended up on this road? Because drugs.
Yeah.
I did drugs, Paul.
Well, I want.
I could have done heroin drugs, and I could have ended up in a really bad place
Mhm.
just as easily as I ended up in this good spot.
I want to acknowledge something though that I think it feels important to me. So I'll say that is, I think though to obviously we're not trying to turn this into a pat yourself on the back or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to lead
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
but I do want to acknowledge the fact that you did have a choice. You said I got lucky and this is what I got from my experience. You did have a choice not to receive that, but you chose to receive. So, like you said, it kind of came to me, but you could have refused it.
Yeah, I
So,
dig that. I can accept that.
and to your point about,
I was open to it.
yeah, yeah. And to your point about taking drugs, many guests have talked about their own experiences, whether it be ayahuasca or psilocybin or
Hmm.
bufo, or I personally haven't yet, I'll say that, had my journey with these types of experiences, but many people have talked about them. Many people have talked about the benefits that they've experienced from them. And so, neither I nor you are here to endorse any one or the other. It's really more about what it does for you. I'm just curious, what was your path, and what was the most significant thing about it for you, in addition to what you've already shared?
No, are we talking about the drug specifically?
Yeah, you said psychedelics.
Yeah. So as you named those all off, my answer to all of them was yes, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first experience was with psilocybin, was with magic mushrooms, and I did my research. I understood about setting, dose, and substance, and this was not easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a DEA agent, and these are Schedule One illegal drugs. And so, yeah, I'm certainly not telling anybody to use it. Even in my one man show, I talk all about the drugs and I talk about the path, and I get to the very end and I say, ironically, I'm not telling you to do drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what this is about. Find your own path up the mountain. This was mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling you to do this. But psilocybin taught me the connection of love with all of us. And it was a very surprising lesson for somebody who was very much a loner, independent, leave me alone. Sometimes I'm better than you, kind of a human. So to
Mm-hmm.
have that opened up and do that for me was amazing. Ayahuasca, the funny thing is I tell it in my show is 6 hours of ayahuasca gave me the same effect as 2 years of intense psychotherapy from when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a therapist today. And she saw my show and said, well, why don't you just do ayahuasca? Why are you talking to me? And I said, because you're helping me. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I can't grow and benefit from your help. But
Mm-hmm.
ayahuasca taught me that I'm not powerless. That was one of the big lessons for me, is that I have the power to make changes in my life, because I never really felt that. Um, other substances have shown me what I believe to be that soul level experience of reality. And so, and what they all boil down to is intense meditation, right? They
Mm-hmm.
all give me that connection with the oneness and with pure consciousness. Peyote out in the Arizona desert, I just was pure consciousness. My monkey mind and my destructive ego were no longer at play, and I was
Mm-hmm.
able to really just be with my big ass self. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to turn that into a comedy bit, but
I think you're gonna have to, because it's great.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's what the path was for me. Is it showed me a lot, and it's been 9 years
Mm-hmm.
of doing this at this point, and probably a grand total of maybe 18 experiences. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
something that one would do every weekend. If you
Right.
find yourself
Right.
doing it every weekend, then you've got a little bit of a problem.
Hmm.
because you're seeking something else, maybe an escape, right?
Yeah. Is
Because
it even solving anything for
yeah,
you?
because
Yeah.
these medicines, these drugs, um, they're not necessarily fun. They
Hmm.
punch you in the face and they show you things and you learn things and they make you throw up and they make you feel sick and you don't get done with it. Like I had a colonoscopy and what they gave me was fentanyl. I have never felt that happy.
Wow.
Yeah, they mix it with something else. I'm like profanol. I
Hmm.
forget what it is, but I have never in my life been that happy.
Hmm.
It was they had to wake, and as soon as I woke up, I was like, "Would somebody please take my picture? I need to know what it was like when I was this happy."
Mm.
Right? That's psychedelics don't do that for you.
Right.
Psychedelics give you a
Right.
hard punch in the face lesson, and
It
so
is not recreational. Yeah.
yeah, it's really and some of my friends. I've been to Burning Man a couple times, and I've had
Hmm.
friends who do things at Burning Man and have a terrible experience and they come tell me about it and I'm like, yeah, of course. What were you expecting?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you were doing like a spiritual level dose here and you're out at a big art experience, maybe a little
Hmm.
tiny bit. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where
Okay.
that is. I just got lucky with that.
You've shared a lot with us. You've shared us about what happened, where you were sitting on a comma, this tragic event in your life, and you've shared with us, what you learned about yourself. Let's go on to the fourth question, which is, what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma? I feel like you've already shared some, but what would you add to what you've already shared?
Of what is different for me now that I've got myself off of it.
Or yeah, or just as a result of sitting on that comma, what all has changed for you?
Um, I really think it's a sense of love and connection and being able to be here in the moment. Um, and if I'm lucky and I'm able to demonstrate to other people that transformation is possible,
Hmm.
then that that's a wonderful thing. I know that's not necessarily me, um, but I guess that's it. And again, I'm not always that way. You know what I mean? I still get mad at somebody not going on a green light, right? And so
Hmm.
I still will. The old me, will still bubble up and old patterns. It's really hard to rewire your entire brain. So, but overall, I like where I am in terms of understanding who I really am, that I am not the doer of this life. I'm
Hmm.
the observer of the doer of this life. And so, yeah, I think that means a lot to me.
I appreciate you sharing that. And it's interesting as you were talking about that experience and that example with the green light and so forth. It's like, I've had conversations with friends and we've shared stories, and I'm kind of similar in that respect that it's like one day you're feeling super enlightened, and glowing and golden light and everything like that. And then somebody says something and you want to punch them in the face. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm not enlightened. But like, I think there are maybe this is just a belief, but I think there are those who would not pursue it at all because, in our society, we're taught that if you can't go all the way or if you can't do it completely or if you can't be 100% consistent, then you're somehow failing. And I just think of the number of
Right.
people who would like not even try because they see the fact that I'm not going to be able to hold up to that standard. And it's like, well, let's look at the standard. Like, there's no reason not to exercise, even if you're not going to end up on the cover of we don't do magazines much anymore. But anyway,
Right. Right.
like, yeah. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you is like, just continue to challenge yourself. And you started this whole, kind of experience that you're sharing your story with this, like holding myself back. And now look at you, as a result of all of this. That's what I see the most. And you tell me if I'm wrong, is that I no longer hold myself back. I acknowledge all the ways in which I'm still Stuart, but I'm not holding myself back from something that I can have now.
I might every now and then, but I think you're right. Overall, I'm not held back. In fact, I've done
Mm.
some things that I wouldn't even tell you about on the podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there's a lot less because I think it's when you're living in the moment, right? When you're able to actually be here in this moment, you're not worried about the future. You're not fretting over the past. And so I think one might be a little more free
Mm-hmm.
to act and do these things that you're talking about.
Let me ask you the last question, and you can respond to this however briefly or detailed you want. And that is, What does getting off the comma look like for you?
So the actual moment of getting off the comma, or just the time after?
You can go wherever you want with it. That's the beauty of these questions. What?
Yeah. So my getting off the comma was, like a Wile E. Coyote moment. I didn't like try to get off my comma. I was blown
Mm,
off of it with emotional torment TNT, right? And so I didn't mean to get off my comma. I didn't even know until I started talking to you. I wouldn't have even put it that necessarily that way, but it was. I could look back in my life and see that I was limiting myself,
mm,
very much. And so what I'm able to do now is, I still have a comfort zone. There's still things that make me uncomfortable. I'm able to sometimes step out of it. Sometimes I still stay inside, because comfortable does feel good. But I think in general, I'm much more open to going with the flow of my life. I think there's a flow out there. You can call it the universe, the Tao, whatever you want to call it. There is some natural flow of time and energy and X axis and Y axis and Z axis, whatever it is, there's a flow going on out there. And I'm much better to go with that as opposed to fight it.
it sounds like a profound change, and I appreciate the acknowledgments that you make too about and I'm still this and I'm still that, and like it's the andness of it, right? Which I think is so important for folks to hear. It is for me, at least, that it's like there is no perfect way to do this. As you said, many paths to the top of the mountain. Choose your own path, and I so appreciate how your story really illustrates that for us today.
Thank you.
So, Stuart, obviously, I'm sure there's lots more that we could talk about, but all podcasts must come to an end. So, as we kind of round things out here, for anybody who does want to learn more about you, follow your journey, I know you have some content out there that is available for people. Where can people find you? I'll certainly put all your links in the show notes. If people want to connect with you or check in with you or see what you're up to, where can they find you?
So my speaking website is Meet Stuart, and the dot is in between the stew and the art. So meetstu.art. My and I don't know I don't remember what I gave you, but my show is either thegrieftrip.com or stonedapecomedy.com. And then my handles are Meet Stuart Preston or The Grief Trip.
Okay, awesome. And like I said, we'll have that in the show notes. Last thing we do here, because obviously you being here is part of what we do on this podcast, right? Which is we give people voice, give people a platform for their voices. We share stories. We share stories of people's experiences with setting on a comma and getting off the comma. And your story wouldn't be complete if we didn't give you an opportunity to lift others up as well. And I call this section acknowledgments. So as you think about people in your life, that could be causes, organizations, other creators, or just important people in your life, and you wanted to give them a voice or boost them or lift them up, who would you like to acknowledge today? And I'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well.
Okay. Yeah. And so I feel like I just won the Oscar. I would thank my parents. Obviously, my son, Ian, is a huge part of everything about me. My daughter is the same way. Um, a lot of what I talk about and what I've learned over time is from a man who died 3 or 4 years ago named Ram Dass.
Mm,
And so I learned a lot from him, and it showed me to my holy books, the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita and these kind of things. And so I'm very grateful for all of that. We have a foundation in my son's honor. The official name is Ian Preston Memorial Fund, but we call
mhm.
it the Complete Badass Foundation, and completebadass.com, I think it is. And that's because he had a business card, and his title on his business card was Complete Badass.
Mm,
And just that's kind of how he was known, because he had very high standards and he expected people to meet up to his own standards, but he also did it with a sharp wit and a big smile. Um, so what we do there is we help to get people help with ketamine counseling and other treatments, because once somebody's in what we call the whirlpool of suicidality, it's very
mhm,
hard to get out. And one of the
mhm.
few ways that you can actually pluck somebody out of that is with a ketamine treatment. And
Okay.
ketamine treatments are not cheap because of the malpractice insurance. The ketamine itself is nothing, right? But the actual malpractice insurance makes it it's expensive enough. A lot of people don't get access. So what we try to do is raise money. So if you want to go give us money, we love your money, so we can help other people. And that's really what our focus is to try to help people and potentially save lives so that other parents don't have to go through this.
Okay. Well, and you also mentioned earlier the grief trip. Was there anything else you wanted to include in your acknowledgments here about that?
Well, that's a book I wrote, and I'm actually rebranding my show. It was called the Stoned Ape Show, but that's a long story. But the people who coined that term, two ethnopharmacologists, they don't like the term stoned ape either. So I rebranded it the Grief Trip. It's also the title of my book, and that's just something that my show is called the Grief Trip.
Stuart, thank you so much for coming on here, sharing very courageously, your story, and being able to put that out there for others to reflect on and acknowledge and relate to and empathize with. And I certainly appreciate it. There's been so many things here that I have kind of made some notes about myself for me to reflect on in my contemplations. And I wish you a wonderful weekend ahead as of the time that we're recording this. And we'll definitely look forward to following your journey from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. You're doing real good. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. What an honor it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. Think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. Surprises can reveal themselves to you when you do this. And if you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Let's spread the word. Let's continue to build connection. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast here on this platform and social media at Off the Comma, and feel free to comment and interact with these posts and episodes. Check out my website for workshops, events, and my sponsor community. I'm covering the costs of production by curating my own sponsors who align with our vision. Be sure to check them out. They're all powerful people and businesses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.